Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first in a series of presentations on mental well-being. This first one is self-care for entrepreneurs. And I would like to start by introducing myself and my colleague. My name is Charles Dike. And my colleague who's here with me, both of us are going to do these presentations, is Thaddeus Iheanacho. Both of us are medical doctors, first and foremost, and we have then gone on to specialize in mental health treatment, management, and so on. But we're first and foremost physicians, medical doctors, and we work at Yale University in the USA, but we are both Nigerians, so we're trained in Nigeria before moving on to work in this area. We're very excited to participate in this program, excited to be helpful in any way, and this is one way for us to be helpful, and we're very happy for the opportunity. I'm going to do most of the talking today. The next presentation, Ted will do most of the talking. This is how we're going to do it, but we will both be here, and once in a while he might chime in, or I might chime in, or ask him to chime in. That's fine, but today I'm going to do most of the talking. Just want to mention a couple of things. First is that you all received the outline, a survey, a link to a survey just before now, and that's for us to get a general sense of your basic understanding of mental health issues. We know that many people now are really becoming aware of mental wellness, mental health, but we still want to have a general sense of where the majority of people on this call are, their understanding of mental health issues. So this is the first outline here. Is we're going to have many weeks of this type of interactions with you, but the next 3 are going to be on strategies, stress and anxiety, and strategies for managing them, and then we will proceed to other areas. In the interest of time, I'm going to move quickly over some of the areas of our talk to give you a chance to ask questions. There is a box for Q&A on your screen. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask the questions in that box. And at the end, we will pick on some of the questions and respond to them. Ted and I will do that. So if everything is okay, let me find out if it's time to just proceed with the talk, or if we're still going to wait a couple of minutes for more people to come in. All right, so I have been given the go-ahead to proceed. So I'm going to start with this slide. Now, this is not a religious or spiritual presentation by any means, but I find this quote to be absolutely apt for this talk. And it comes from the Bible, it comes from Proverbs, and it says, above all else, right? It's above all else. Now, this is King Solomon speaking, and everyone knows that he's the wisest man that ever lived. And so when King Solomon says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. That's a really important thing for all of us to sit up and listen, because it's coming from King Solomon, a wise man. Now, when you dig deeper, the heart here they are talking about is not your physical heart that is a muscle in your chest. It's actually talking about your thoughts and your emotions, your mind, right? So guard your mind, guard your thoughts, for everything comes from there. Now, that same passage continues and says, keep your mouth free of perversity. Keep your mouth free of perversity. Fix your gaze directly ahead of you. Don't get distracted. Look in the right direction. Give careful thought, thinking again, to the paths of your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways. So there's the thoughts and emotions, and then there's an action, your behavior, right? This is what this passage, this is why it's so powerful, because this is the bedrock of some of our treatments known as cognitive behavioral therapy. Your thinking influences your emotions, how you feel, right? And both of them influence your behavior, what you do. So you feel bad and you say, well, I'm going to do this. Or you think bad, you think something is not going well, it makes you feel a certain way, and you respond with an action or behavior that can either be positive or negative. And that is the bedrock, the foundation of cognitive behavioral therapy. We're going to dive into all of this briefly. So we're talking about self-care. You know, self-care is a term that talks about care for your body and your mind. It's important to recognize that self-care is influenced by how you feel, what you feel, your emotions, your thinking, and your behavior. They all influence your self-care. So today we're going to be talking about doing a checkup from the neck up, right? So you go to see your doctor and you do a checkup of all your systems, your body, or you take your car to the mechanic for a checkup and they check up all the engines and so on. But today we're going to be doing checkup from the neck up. We're going to do an emotional inventory. You know, we're going to be able to properly categorize your emotions so that you know you can put a finger on what you're feeling. You can name it. You can say, I am feeling this. I am doing that. Now, Africans are not known for being able to recognize their emotions. You know, we know that we are part of this system. In fact, if you're going to diagnose someone with depression and you're basing on just their emotional expressions, you're not going to get it in Africa, because we're going to go and tell you about how we're not sleeping well, you know, and we have a headache, all kinds of ants are crawling over us. Meanwhile, they're not going to tell you about the mood. So today we're going to be able to learn how to understand what we're feeling and actually put a name to it so that we can address it. That is an emotional inventory, and it's the first element of your checkup from the neck up. We need to be able to recognize when we have positive emotions so we can capitalize on them, because good things happen when you capitalize on positive emotions. Not excessively positive, because that could be a problem as well, but regular positive emotions. We also need to recognize negative emotions so that we can manage them immediately. We need to also then recognize negative thoughts so that we can replace those negative thoughts fairly quickly with positive ones. Finally, we need to be able to understand our behaviors. Are they maladaptive? Are they negative? Or are they positive? And we need to be able to manage our behaviors when they are maladaptive. Sometimes it requires you to be intentional in reviewing yourself in self-reflection to be able to remember that this behavior is actually not normal. And then you can manage that fairly quickly. So I pulled this list of emotions from the web so that you all can have access to it fairly quickly. And I'm just going to go over a couple of them. So again, to try to be able to name what you're feeling, to put a finger on it so you can manage it. So let's look at sad. Now, under sad, it says, you know, you're feeling depressed, you're feeling desperate, dejected, heavy, crushed, disgusted, upset, sorrowful, weepy. So when you feel any of these words underneath sad, you can actually say it, you know, I am feeling this way. I am feeling frustrated. I'm feeling crushed by this. I think I'm feeling sad. Now that's really important. But when you're feeling happy, if you look at happy is another one. You're feeling amused, delighted, glad, pleased, charmed. You need to be able to put a name to all of these words so that you can, you know, be familiar with it. When you feel those words, you know, oh yeah, I am feeling happy. And you also need to be able to remember times in the past when you have felt that way, because there are times in the future when you'll be feeling a negative feeling, a negative emotional state, that it will be important for you to reflect on times in the past when you've actually felt happy, and you can look at all these words underneath as what it means to be happy, and you might be able to use them to replace the sad feeling later in life. But we can get to that in a minute. Now let's look at feeling hurt. Many people don't say, you hurt me, or what does that mean? Instead, they say, I feel sad because you did this. But if you look at hurt, it's like somebody, feeling betrayed, let down, wounded, criticized, abused. So you can know all of this and say, I felt let down, you hurt me, or I felt betrayed, I felt really hurt, and so on. So, but feeling hurt can sometimes also lead to feeling sad, but at least you can put a name to it so that you know exactly what you're feeling, and that will help you decide how to respond to it, or at least how to present it to somebody that you're talking to. Now, let's look at anxiety, tired, and helped very quickly, and then we can move on. So anxious, you're feeling stressed, troubled, uncomfortable, stunned, frozen. Anxiety is a good emotion. You need anxiety to function. You need to be a little bit anxious to present a big presentation. I need to be anxious to give this talk. You need anxiety to function. If you're in front of a lion or a tiger, you need anxiety to stand up and run. But you don't need too much anxiety to the point where you become frozen, you become paralyzed, and that's a problem, right? So it's okay to say, I'm really feeling anxious about this because it's going to get you off your butt and get you doing the work you need. But it's not okay to say, I am so anxious that I can't even start anywhere. I'm paralyzed. That's a problem. So be able to recognize that. Now, what about feeling tired? Now look at this, what comes under tired. Tired is a strange emotion because it mimics so many different things. Indifferent, bored, drained, exhausted, weary, powerless. Why is it important to know when you're tired? It's important because the treatment for this is very simple. It's rest. You need rest. It's not the time to push through and do 24 hours and keep working. You need rest. It could be a power nap. It could be some other kind of rest. But don't underestimate what happens when you're resting. When you're resting, your mind begins to deal with begins to handle the stressors you have. Categorize things, put them in different boxes, help you to manage yourself so that when you wake up, you're more refreshed. Things are not quite as bad as they were, but you're more able to think better because your mind is working really hard when you're rested. So it's important to recognize those emotional states so that you don't make decisions when you're in those emotional states. They are going to not be necessarily good decisions. Recognize when you're being helped, because again, that will help you learn to be grateful. Gratitude gives you a positive attitude. So I'm not going to spend any more time here, but I want you to see this as part of your homework, to just begin to learn how to put a name to your emotion, because we're going to use it to manage your emotions later on. Now, this is another concept I want to talk about. This is a really important concept, the concept that psychologists call emotional currency. So how much emotion in any given day, you have a certain amount of emotion that you can give, think of your emotions as currency. How would you like to spend your emotional currency? How would you like to spend your emotional naira or emotional dollars? So I'll give you an example. Let's say at the beginning of a day, you have 100 emotional naira, right? Now you look at it and you say, I have children and they drain me a little bit. I'm not going to use the word draining because they cost you emotion. I would say, well, I would like to invest maybe 20 emotional naira in my kids, right? In what they're costing me and the kind of stress, but I'm going to invest that emotion in them because it's important. So this day I've already lost 20 emotional naira. I have only 80 to give. And then you have a spouse, right? So maybe you also need to invest some emotional naira in your spouse. Okay, so you invest 20 emotional naira in your spouse. Then at work, you have this new employee that you're training that is driving you crazy. It's draining emotion, but you have to train them because it's important. So you invest 40 emotional naira on that employee. Now you have only 20 left. So if your boss comes and tells you things and you're stressed out by it and you're drained by it, you've lost it. You're now functioning in the negative. So it's important to know when you are in a deficit so that you can manage it fairly quickly. Now, there are certain things that would deplete your emotional currency. One, for example, if you're listening to bad news, we are in this era of COVID. Every single news is intense, it's painful, it's difficult. Another 5,000 people have died in the US. Oh my God, don't do this, don't do that. If you dwell in that news every day, or you assign a certain amount of time in it, you are spending your emotional dollars there. And so the question for you is, do you really want to spend your emotional dollars there as much, or how much do you want to invest in it? Is it 5 naira or is it 50 naira in it? Negative interactions with friends. Certain friends will call you and each time they leave you, you're drained because they are calling you for all kinds of negative, deep things, and you're investing all your emotions in them. Well, at the end of the day, when you're investing 80 naira, emotional naira on them, and you only have nothing left, you are drained. The question is, do you really want to spend all your emotional currency in that interaction, or do you want to find a way to change it? Negative thoughts, negative behaviors, all of these things drain your emotional currency. I have multiple examples that are, you all recognize, but we don't have time to go into them. But what about things that might enhance your emotional currency, that might fill it up when you feel in deficit? So you're losing it, but you need them to be filled back so you can be stronger and get on with your life. Good news can do that. Uplifting interactions, so certain people that might lift you up when you talk to them, and so on. Positive thoughts, there are many actions that can lift your emotional currency. And so your task throughout the day is really trying to check to see where you are in your emotions. That's part of what your checkup from the neck up is, so that you know whether you are in the deficit or whether you are in the positive. You can name the emotions you're feeling because now you're experts at it, having looked at all the emotions, and you know why you are in a deficit, and you try to rebalance it all through the day. That might mean taking time out to have a quick nap, or taking whatever it is, which we're going to go back to in a minute, might help you rebalance your emotional currency and come back to a positive. Why is this important? It's important because whether we know it or not, our emotions influence our decisions. So if you're in a negative emotional state, you're likely to make decisions that are not going to be helpful in the long term. That's a really important thing to bear in mind. Now, so moving on, how do we manage emotional deficit? This is an active process. You have got to do something. So response to emotional distress could be a positive or a negative behavior, your choice. What are the positive behaviors, which you will call positive emotional coping mechanisms for managing emotional deficit? I've talked about exercise. You'll be surprised. Each time you exercise, your body releases all kinds of neurochemicals. Some of them are happy neurochemicals. They lift you up. And I'm not talking about strenuous exercise. It could be walking, 2 miles or a mile and so on and so forth. Positive music, maybe that's what you need. You need 10 minutes of positive music. I can tell you there was a time I was in managing this very, very difficult forensic hospital, and I was the head of that hospital. Many intense activities happening. Before I go into some of the meetings, I am so down and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is going to be another intense meeting. So I lock my office door, I play this music for 5 minutes, I feel energized, I'm ready to go. Or I take a walk for 10 minutes, 5 minutes while I'm playing that music in my head, or I play the music, I sing it. I come back and I'm refreshed and I'm ready for this meeting. So you need to know what will work for you. Other things that can help you when you're in emotional deficit could be either the movies, but you may not have time at work. You can do that at home. Religious texts, sleep, I've talked about already. Rest, absolutely crucial. Playing a game, talking to certain positive friends and positive relationships. Time alone sometimes can allow you to regroup and get back to your putting everything aside so that you can get back to what you have ahead of you. You have to manage unhealthy relationships. We can go into a lot. We can talk about that later on. But also being grateful, being able to think back and think where you have come from. Look at how far you have come. I really like this talk with entrepreneurs because you all have had challenges in life. You've overcome them. You are where you are. And that's going to be very useful. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute when I talk about thoughts. But just as you have positive things to feel you when you're feeling emotionally drained and deficit, some people might resort to negative actions to do the same work, to get you feeling better. What do? You drink, because when you drink, you feel better. However, it's a negative feeling better. It's a negative coping mechanism. You use drugs, you smoke, you gamble, maintaining unhealthy relationships. That may be the time you call this boy or girl that you know is not good for you to spend the night with you. These are negative coping techniques. You're trying to manage your emotional deficit, but you're doing it using a maladaptive method. Time alone can be a positive or negative, depending on how you use the time alone. If you're stewing in it 100%, then that becomes a negative coping. But if you're using it to regroup and do other thinking, that might help. Negative coping leads to bad choices, bad decisions. You need to be able to know where you are by doing that emotional inventory, reflecting on yourself so that you know when to do decisions and when not to. But then one of the tasks for you is to know what helps you, what lifts you up when you are in an emotional deficit, and employ it regularly throughout the day to rebalance yourself. Now, let's talk briefly about thoughts. As I said before, it all starts with what you're thinking. What you're thinking often leads to how you feel and often leads to an action, which could be a positive or a negative action. There's a saying that if you sow a thought, you reap a deed, which is an action. If you sow a deed, you reap a habit. If you sow a habit, you reap a character. And if you sow a character, you reap a destiny. Now, here's an example. If your thinking tells you you will never be successful because you've just had 2 failed ideas, you're not going to be successful. That's what your thought tells you. And you all have been there. I've been there. I'm going to give my example in a minute. So what's the action? You begin to say to yourself, what's the point in trying? I'm not going to be successful anyway. I've failed 2 times. No need to try. Then when you do that often enough, guess what? It becomes a habit. Suddenly, it becomes a character. You become that person that everyone knows that is not going to do anything. You're just not going to try. He's not even going to try. That's his personality. Now you've taken on this role as your personality. It's become your character, and it destroys your destiny. Likewise, you're feeling worthless. You wake up, oh my God, I'm not good at anything. I'm worthless. I'm this and that. You begin to feel sad. It might lead you the other way. Now you get into drinking to feel better. Then you drink to feel better more. Then you drink to feel, then it becomes a habit. Then before you know it, you're an alcoholic. It damages your character, destroys your destiny. I'll give you a good example of what happened to me here. And this is why I'm saying that we all here, I'm really happy that I'm talking to a group of entrepreneurs, because you've been through stuff. Now, I'm one of those guys like you all, never failed any exams in my life, kind of did well in elementary school and high school and college. I went to university in Nigeria, I went to medical school, and, traveled abroad, did well. All through, I've always done well, done great. Then one day I sat for this exam, and I was really cocky. I didn't really study as much as I should, but, never failed anything. In fact, I've always done really well. So I sat for this exam and I failed that exam. And let me tell you what happened to me after I failed this exam. I thought my life was over. I began to see myself as a fraud. You know, were all those successes in life, were they a mistake? Was I a fraud? I'm just not good enough. I mean, I can't pass this exam. It really worried me intensely for 2 weeks. Thank God I then told my wife some what I was thinking, and she says to me, Charles, what's wrong with you? And took me through all the successes in my life, got me to start to think about who I was. And this was not going to define me. I am not what my mind is telling me I am. I am not what my thoughts are telling me I am. I could reflect on all my past successes, small and large, difficult and not so difficult. And that helped me recognize, to put this in the proper perspective. Maybe if I had studied as I usually did, maybe if I had done this, maybe I just wasn't needed to do this. So I'm saying this to you all because you all are like me. You've been through stuff, you've been successful, you're doing all kinds of things, you're going to have failures, you're going to have other things. Your thoughts are going to step in the way and tell you who you're not, what you're not. You need to recognize that, challenge it, stop it, and deal with it right away. So how do you manage these thoughts? Identify the negative thoughts. This is a challenge. It's not easy when you're feeling a certain way to go back and say, well, what am I thinking about? You know, why am I feeling this? What am I thinking? Identify the negative thought and stop that thought immediately, right? Stop it immediately. Replace the thought with positive affirmations. There are many positive affirmations online, things that tell you who you are, what you are, and so on and so forth. You can replace them. And you can also replace them with religious affirmations. And you can replace them with the truth. Because if you look back at your life, you will see the truth. You know, for example, if your thoughts tell you you're not good enough, well, that's not true. So, but you need to be able to recognize that thought, stop it, and replace it with the truth, or replace it with positive affirmations. And I've talked about recalling past challenges in life that have gotten you to where you are, and use it for motivation to move forward. Don't stay there. So in summary, I'm trying to make sure if I can get this in 30 minutes, if I can. In summary, self-care depends on your ability to manage your thoughts, your emotions, and your behavior. In summary, unhealthy thoughts lead to unhealthy emotions, lead to unhealthy behavior, which leads to more unhealthy thoughts, more unhealthy behavior, and so on and so forth. It is in fact a vicious circle. You need to recognize that. A healthy self, which is both physical and mental, is essential for an entrepreneur to be successful. The take-home message here is that you need to always do a check-up from the neck up throughout the day and adjust yourself accordingly, right? So you can ask yourself during the day or maybe at night, how do I feel right now, right? So when you know the emotions because you can now point them using that chart. I mean, you've learned what you're feeling. And if you're feeling depressed, you know that that's a deviation from your normal self. If you're feeling something that is negative, you know it is a deviation from your normal self. You can ask your question, has my anxiety put me in a bad place mentally? Has it put me in a place where I am not doing well? I might make some mistakes. Am I drinking or smoking more? Am I doing risky behaviors? Because sometimes people do these risky behaviors to manage the emotional feelings deficit they have. But when you're doing that reflection on yourself, you can put a finger on it and say, you know what? I am doing this thing. It's a deviation from my normal, and I need to manage it right away. Am I thinking straight? Is my thinking off? You know, what at the end of the day, you can ask yourself, what have I experienced today? What emotions did I experience today? Did I experience anger? Did I experience happiness, humor, fear? Was I calm? And you begin to sort of reflect on your emotions, because guess what? You can manage it. You can be in control of it, but you've got to know it first so that you can manage it and redirect it positively. Listen to your emotions, but don't get stuck in the bad. You recognize the bad emotions and you do something about it. Now, the homework for you is to practice doing this emotional inventory throughout the day and night, which means you have to first start by looking at your emotional charts and identifying what each feeling you have means. And those are in that chart that has different emotional states. So you check yourself regularly. It doesn't, obviously, you're not going to do this like every 2 seconds, but you find the time to get a sense where you are in your emotions. Now, the other really important thing to do is to identify negative thoughts. You need to identify negative thoughts so that you can stop them, and then you can replace them with healthier ones, which could be those positive affirmations. You can just keep repeating those positive affirmations. You know who you are, you're successful, you're this, you're that. If you're a religious person, you can go into, what God says you are, and remind yourself of all of that. Remind yourself of your successes. Remind yourself of how you've overcome challenges, and just replace those negative thoughts. I said good morning to my boss. He did not respond to me. Oh my God, it means I must be a terrible person. I must be horrible. How come he didn't respond to me? How come this and that? How come? And you begin to let that run your life. Stop it right away and tell yourself who you are and remind yourself of all the positives and move on with your life. These 2 homework I've given you are not really necessarily easy. You've got to be intentional. You've got to make time for them. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get at them. So those are the homework that you have. Ted, if you have 5 minutes or so, can you, if you have anything you want to add, please do, while I look at the questions that people have raised for us.
No, I don't have a lot to add. Thank you so much for the powerful presentation. We look through some of the questions and see what we can answer now and the things that we'll probably answer down the road as we do some of the other topics.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Ted. The first question here says, how can someone overcome depression as an entrepreneur and also during a lockdown? Now, there's a whole talk on this. I don't think I'm going to do justice to this in 2 seconds. But the other talks that talk about stress and managing stress and emotion, we're going to, bring in COVID into it. So what's happening in the era of COVID is that your life is completely off. One of the things that we forget is that on a regular day, our lives are structured, right? Everything is being structured. You wake up at a certain time, you get breakfast, you get your kids ready for school, you get out of the house at a certain time, you get to work. There's a structure of what you're going to do all through the day, and there's a structure of what you're going to do toward the evening. You come back, you still have the structure, and you have to do all of that. Now, that's lost. You're back home in your home, no structure. That's the first thing. So the first question is, how do you recreate structure? Next is, you're living with everyone you don't usually live with all through the day. And the question is, again, what does that mean and how do you manage that? There are many new things that are happening when you're locked up in your house alone by yourself, or locked up alone with all kinds of people. That might make life more difficult for you. And it's really being able to review all of that, the structure, the interactions, and some of what I've just mentioned about recognizing where your emotional state is and what is causing it. Look at your thinking process and try to manage it. But I think that I will come back to a lot more of how to manage this later on, because this is a whole talk that will address that as well. I usually talk to myself when I'm alone. What causes this? Talking to yourself when you're alone is not necessarily a bad thing. Many people use it as a way to motivate themselves, as a way to structure themselves, as their normal personality, right? So nothing wrong with that. When you're talking to yourself in response to a voice that is talking to you that you can't see, or a picture, a vision that you're having that nobody else can see, but you're talking to that yourself in talking to that vision or talking to the voice, that's when it becomes a problem. But ordinarily talking to yourself could be affirming, it could be motivating, it could be reassuring, and it could be positive. Now, is there any way you can perform a self-test for mental health, a self-test for mental health. Now, that's a huge question because mental health and mental illness is a broad area. There are tools that you can use to quickly check what your mood is like, whether you're in a depression, whether your mind is playing tricks on you, whether you are having an unusual reality of life. There are tools that you can use to check on those things. Some of them are online, but much better really to ask someone who's maybe a specialist in that area to guide you. We can give you some of the tools that you can look at. Maybe Ted at some point will point you in that direction. But those things exist, and we can put that up later on. How can entrepreneurs checkmate mental health with customers? Checkmate mental health with customers. I'm not sure I fully understand that. How can entrepreneurs checkmate mental health with customers? Ted, do you understand that?
I don't understand it, but I would imagine that Etifiok is trying to ask, how do you identify customers who have mental health issues, or how do you cope or manage when your customers present with something that looks like mental health? I'm not sure. I wish they can clarify.
Yeah, okay, so we'll come back to that. If you wrote that question, clarify later on so we can pick it up as we're moving on. Somebody says, an entrepreneur that's a leader should be involved at 100% in mental health of your employees as they come with you to accomplish a goal. As entrepreneur or leader, should you be involved at 100% in the mental health of your employees as they come to you to accomplish a goal? Okay, so basically what you're saying is, should you be aware of people's emotional state, mental health, because they're coming to you with problems, but you also need them to be in a stable mental health in order for you all to accomplish a goal? And the answer is lots of companies and lots of individuals are actually putting this into their practice. They're making attempts to provide opportunities for people to have periods of breaks, to have things that enhance their emotional state, to not overwhelm them with activity continuously, but to provide breaks in between or provide opportunities for people to unwind, think, and plan. There are, there are tools. Many different companies are paying attention to mental well-being, self-care and well-being of your employees. And you ask, what do you need to do to improve the well-being of your employees? You might start actually with a quick survey of your employees. What do they find challenging? What do they find not challenging, stressful, anonymous type survey, so people don't feel judged or feel like they can't speak their mind, and ask about what they think would help them be more emotionally stable at work, what they think will help them be more productive, more at peace, more at calm. So they can put that out to you, and then you put it together and see how best you can accomplish what they might be looking for. But that's one way to think about it. But yes, a healthy environment, a healthy work environment ultimately leads to better productivity, better retention of your good staff, because the last thing you want is to train somebody, they become really good, and then because of the toxicity or of the environment, they leave. So you need to have your finger on the emotional thermometer of your workplace. Can anxiety bring about reduction in growth of a company or establishment? As I said before, anxiety is a good thing, but it mustn't be beyond a certain level. If your anxiety is too much, if you are driven by anxiety, if anxiety is controlling everything you do, then of course it's going to negatively impact the growth of your business. But you need to be anxious enough to get you going, right? Anxious enough to know that you need to do extra. Anxious enough to know that you haven't done enough. of what you need to do, but not too anxious that your mind begins to tell you it's never going to work. What's the point? It's too much. Oh my God, you're never going to get it. So your mind has taken over in a negative way, and your anxiety has now become paralyzing and negative rather than positive. And again, you need to manage that. You need to be able to reflect on what you're thinking, and when it begins to become negative, to stop it and replace it with positive, and recognize that anxiety is a good thing. Tell yourself that it's a good thing. However, you need to know when it has crossed a line and challenge it, stop it in order to move forward. In this time of staying at home, what are some ways a person who is an extrovert can remain mentally stable despite being able to interact, despite not being able to interact with friends, go out hiking, and so on? Now, that's a good question about this particular environment. So we are they're talking about social distancing, right? Actually, what they're talking about is physical distancing. It's not necessarily social distancing, because there are ways you can communicate with your friends. There are things you can do to get you guys working together, participating with each other in each other's lives. There are lots of Zoom parties. There are lots of Zoom meetings. There are lots of Zoom Bible studies. There are lots of things that people are doing to connect with people, because as human beings, we need each other. We need human connection. People are watching movies together, by the way, by Zoom, and commenting on it and doing as if they're there together. People are doing games, playing games together. There are all kinds of things you can do together. People are exercising together, like you put up exercise program and they're all doing it together and so on. So there's a lot you can do while you are in a lockup that actually would increase your socialization even more than when you are not in a lockup, because you're so busy running around. So it's a question of thinking about it and deciding what will work for you and your circle of friends. Now, what is the impact of health on our entrepreneurship goals? I see that as a broad question that says, health and performance, health and ability to achieve goals. And of course, physical and mental health. We try to separate these two things, but in fact, they are one and the same. Because if your mental health is off, trust me, your physical health is going to be. So your mental health can affect your physical health and vice versa. Your physical health can affect your mental health. If you have chronic pain all the time and is influencing your ability to go out and do that work and meet customers, it's going to begin to affect your mental health. You're going to begin to feel down, sad, depressed, discouraged, frustrated, and eventually it's going to affect your mental health. So good health is absolutely crucial for performance. Take the time you need to improve your health, because ultimately it's going to improve your productivity. If you kill your health because you think you need to do this one more thing, you're going to destroy your health and ultimately destroy your productivity. So good health is absolutely crucial on your your entrepreneurship goals. So one says, we can qualify emotion. I have, however, found that misunderstanding of self and others often come in relation to attempts to quantify it, usually based on subjective perceptions and insights. We can qualify emotion. That's qualify means putting a number to it, or qualify means identifying exactly what it is, whereas quantify means putting a number to it. I, however, found that misunderstanding of self and others often comes in relation to attempts to quantify it, usually based on subjective perceptions and insights. I really like this. I don't understand it fully, but it helps me think about something. One of the worst things you can do to yourself is to not be true to yourself. So I'm telling you to identify the emotions you're feeling. And then you say, well, I'm a tough guy. I don't feel that. You're not being truthful to yourself. This exercise means you must be very, very transparent. You must look at it and say, what exactly am I feeling? As opposed to this is happening to me because of this individual likes to take my time all the time. I told you about the one who's on the phone every day, calling you, draining you, or someone who wants you to drive them from here to there, take them here and there, coming for you to give them money, give them this and that, and you blame them when you don't have money, when you're drained, when you don't have time because you've been running around doing their work. Actually, this exercise is for you to take back that. Don't blame them, blame yourself, right? Because you need to know when you need to put a stop to certain things. You need to know how much emotional currency you can invest in something before it begins to drain you. Now, if you allow it to happen and it drains you, don't go blaming the other person. Blame yourself for not being able to learn how to manage that situation, how much to invest in it so that you don't get into a negative. This is so common because Africans, as we are drained by all kinds of things and all kinds of people and all kinds of demands and all kinds of needs, and we blame them. However, I am telling you today to reverse it. Look at yourself. Don't be selfish now. Don't live here saying Dr. Dike says I should be selfish. Absolutely not. Don't be selfish, but be aware that you can only be helpful up to a point. After that, you begin to have a negative return on your life. When you get there, you should know when to say, I can't do more, because if I do any more here, I'm going to be in a negative balance. This is about transparency. This is about being helpful to yourself and helpful to the other person, because you need to be truthful, but in love and kindness in the way you present it. All right, so does rest cure or heal emotional tiredness? Yes. So rest generally can help you when you are exhausted, when you are tired, and you look at the words that fall under it. Emotional tiredness could be a reflection of, is it sadness? Is it, are you overwhelmed by what is coming at you? So basically, what you're telling yourself with this question is that you need time to reflect on yourself and identify where you are. What is bringing you to where you are? What is bringing you to this emotional state? It could be many different things, including tiredness. And so you address them one by one, but one alone might not be enough. But you need to sort of do an emotional checklist, inventory, to see what has gotten you there. How can one remove toxic thoughts completely from his mind or heart? How can one control hot temper? Two different huge questions. The first one is, how can you control a toxic thought? Now, I told you this is not going to be easy, right? It requires a lot of practice to be able to replace a negative thought with a positive thought. It requires a lot of practice. You got to do it over and over. You've got to tell yourself the positive things. You've got to remind yourself of who you are. There's a lot you can do. Look at your life. Look at the positives. Look at the challenges you've overcome. Talk to yourself in a positive way. When you Google positive affirmations, you will see all kinds of affirmative comments that will apply to you. Some will not apply to you, but you look at them and use them every day. You might start in the morning by telling yourself those positive affirmations. Before you leave your house, you tell yourself so many of them. Throughout the day, you say it. Before you have a meeting, you think about it in your mind. When you're having a meeting, you're thinking about it in your mind. Someone like me, when I'm having a meeting, as intense as it is, I'm thinking about those positive thoughts. I'm praying in my head, oh God, you've helped me through this before. You're going to give me the ideas here. I know you will. You've always done this for me. You're thinking that in your head, and it settles you down, man, because I'm in these meetings where I'm the only Black man with all these high-powered people who are white and done all kinds of things, but I'm their boss. So, you have to settle yourself. You have to find these thoughts that will let you know that you shouldn't be afraid. Fear is one thing that I didn't talk about here, but fear is always at the bottom of a lot of these things. Am I going to make a mistake? Are they going to think I'm useless? Am I good enough? But you need to kind of keep talking about this positive affirmations all through your day, every day, and it becomes a habit. It has to become a habit. That's the way to get over that. In terms of your hot emotions, there are so many reasons why you can have a hot temper. So many reasons. Some of it might be pathological. Some of it might be just your personality. Some of it might be what you've learned growing up. This is how people have responded to things when you're growing up. So there's a lot of reasons why. Some of us have, our brains are structured in such a way that we're very impulsive and we respond impulsively. And then we feel remorse and, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that. Some of us, when we are drinking gives us more, disinhibits us. And then, by the way, which is why drinking and drugs and all is bad for business, because you can make terrible decisions due to being slightly disinhibited. You don't know you're disinhibited. You think you're you're in control, but alcohol just slips this thing in you and you make poor decisions through disinhibition. Also, you can be impulsive as a result of that habit. So you look, am I drinking? Am I using drugs? Are things I'm doing? Are these things I learned in my life? How to manage emotions? Why am I responding this way? You have to be able to do that kind of transparent, honest review of your own self. And each time you've acted out in anger, take a moment to process that. Look at what you were thinking before it happens, what the situation was around you, how it made you feel, and what you wanted to achieve by that anger. I want to show them I'm the boss. I want to show them I'm this. This is the only way they will know I have authority. These are all false thinking. And so you need to be able to challenge those false thinking in order to be able to get a handle on your hot temper. On the other hand, there are times when it becomes a medical problem, a psychological problem for which you need help learning how to manage. Ramadan, is it possible to avoid negative thoughts, or is it something natural? No, you cannot avoid negative thoughts. We are born that way. Negative thoughts are always going to slip in. I don't care how great you are, you're going to have moments when someone's going to tell you something negative about you, about what you're doing, about somebody else's intentions. Oh my God, they did that because they hate you. They did that because, and if you don't ask, you're going to run with it and make poor decisions, right? So recognize that this is natural. Negative thoughts are going to come, but that's not the question. The question is, what do you do with them? How do you manage them? In a case where one has gone through so much emotional damage while growing up, and then it hinders high-level productivity, what does one do? Excellent question. I really like this. A lot of people have been traumatized growing up. And when they are in a certain state, they begin to relieve the trauma, right? The trauma, the abuse, the pain comes up. And it might make you react in a way that is negative. And it might be a knee-jerk response. It might be because your body goes into safety mode right away. I've got to protect myself. This is the trauma I experienced. This is like it. I've got to act this way. I've got to act that way. Two things. One, being able to take time to recognize where your feelings are coming from. If you're feeling a certain way, ask yourself, where is it coming from? That's the thinking. What am I thinking about? What is the thought that has brought this feeling? Maybe you might be able to recognize that you're reliving your past trauma, and you can understand that this is what is making you feel this way, but you're not in that trauma now. Although this circumstance does feel like it, it's not the same. So you begin to try and see if you can replace that thought with positive, with reality, with the truth that's in front of you. It is not easy. Sometimes you might be able to do it yourself and it'd be okay. But sometimes, quite frankly, you might need help from a specialist to help you overcome that. How do you know when you are the one causing emotional distress on others? Quite frankly, if you take a moment to think about your behavior, your processing, how you interact with others, it will be clear to you. This is not hidden. You will know that there's a certain way you react, you talk, you behave that cause other people to react in a certain way. The other thing you can do is ask them. Ask people, why are you feeling this way? Is this something I did? tell me so that I can correct it. When you're asking though, don't ask so that it becomes a hammer, a tool you're going to use to clobber them for telling you the truth. You have to be someone who's ready to accept the truth in order to have people be transparent and honest with you. Because if they are not, if they are worried that they're going to lose their job or you're going to punch them out or whatever, they're not going to tell you the truth. But if you ask them with genuine interest and with the idea that you want to learn and improve yourself and not get negative, then you're going to get all the answers you need. It will then become how you're going to work on them. One of the things that are giving me a hard time is sleeping. I've been having a hard time with insomnia, but I have been doing better by playing nature sounds like rain, listening to piano sounds because I love instruments. But is there more I can do to get better rest? Those things you're saying are already excellent. The other things to consider is, first of all, have a sleep routine. There are certain things you do before you go to sleep that your body will eventually begin to associate those behaviors with your getting ready for sleep. So how long should you put off your phone or your computer and things before sleep? Is it 30 minutes? Is it 1 hour before? What are the other behaviors you want to do before sleep, so that your body begins to associate that with sleep? Are you watching TV in your bedroom? Maybe you shouldn't, because or maybe you shouldn't do it at a certain time, so that your body will begin to associate this room as a place where I sleep, this bed as my bed where I sleep. There are other types of relaxation exercises which I'm going to take you through when we're talking about managing stress, meditation exercises, mindfulness, progressive muscle relaxation, breathing exercises, alongside what you're doing now, which is the music and the calming music and so on, that will help you also learn how to sleep. When was the last time you drank tea? When was the last time you drank coffee? How long should you drink them before sleep? So there are a few things we can do about that will help you in addition to what you're doing now to help you sleep. How can we eradicate the cause of those emotional deficits? So you identify the emotional deficit. You identify what you think is the cause of it. And for every individual, it's going to be different. Even for the same individual, the situations might be different. But the first step to a cure is diagnosis, right? So it's first of all identifying what you're going through, is identifying where it is coming from. Is it coming from what is happening in front of you? If it's coming from what is happening in front of you, how are you interpreting it so that it becomes your thoughts? And if it's that, what are you going to do about it? Do you need to get out of the relationship? Do you need to get out of that? And when I say relationship, I don't necessarily mean boyfriend, girlfriend, or husband, wife. It could also be business relationship, So there are different things that you need to be really honest with yourself about. But you need to first do that analysis, that diagnosis, to come to a place where you can decide, in this particular circumstance, this is why I think this is happening, and this is what I need to do to avoid it. All right. How do I manage having failed many times? And now, with this pandemic coming at a time, I feel I cannot get things right. The pressure is different, having to innovate anew, keep the mind right. So failure, it's one of those things. Failure is absolutely difficult, especially when you have failed many, many times. I'm just going to leave you with two examples for you to chew on. If you've heard of President Abraham Lincoln, who's now known as one of the best ever presidents of the US. This man failed at every level. He failed at local government elections many times. He failed at the governorship elections many times. He failed and failed and failed and failed. And everyone kept thinking, why do you keep going when you're failing so much? He says, each time I fail, I learn new things of what I shouldn't do. Each time I fail, I'll learn new things of what I could do differently. Each time I fail, I learn how to progress in a different way, until he gets to this point where he now wins the election, and here he is. Thomas Edison, the one who discovered, all kinds of inventions. He would tell you how many times he failed. And the same thinking is, each time I fail, I take a moment to reflect on it and be honest and transparent to myself of what I did right, what I didn't do right, what I shouldn't do. I have learned, and he says, I've learned 1,000 ways of not to do something because I have failed that many times. And then he keeps going. You've got to know that the mere fact, the failure, you only fail when you give up, period. Number one. Number two, you also have to be honest with yourself. If it is something you have no skill in at all, do you need others to help you? Do you need partners that will help you in certain areas? These are all the type of analysis you need to do. And I think at this point, the time is well spent. We have a lot more questions, but I hope you've been able to learn some things. I hope you're going to engage in the homework, and I wish you all the best as we all continue to manage ourselves in this very difficult time. Thank you again for your attention, and all the best. Bye-bye.